Thank you for turning to page 121. Today we're going to take a look at a new offering from Travelers, a few weeks old as of the making of this video, Cluster Truck. And true confession time, had you been within 10 feet of me when I read the premise of this offering, you would have heard my eyes roll. I am not a big comedy in role-playing fan. I like to have fun while we role-play. I don't like books that are written to be comedic. That being said, I was wrong. This book has a lot of good stuff in it. There's actually a lot of meat on the bone in this one, beyond the cluster truck stuff. If you don't want to be truckers in space, which by the way has already been done by other 2-6 companies, including Traveler. Traveler has done space trucking since its inception. Independence Games does a good job of it too. But if you read into what they're doing in this one, initially it didn't sound like it was for me. I actually debated not buying this. Once I bought it and I started reading it, I realized that Martin J. Doherty still brings the goods. So here we go. Traveler Cluster Truck. And there we go. And of course, Martin Doherty is our author. And it's presented, it's new. And I'm going to go through most of the book. There are a bunch of adventures in the back here. I'm not going to go through those. So the introduction gives us the style and themes. And one important line here. This is Smokey and the Bandit, not Duel. Smokey and the Bandit was a very famous film released in 1977 for, on the big screen, starring Burt Reynolds, Sally Field, Jerry Reed, Jackie Gleason. It's a good film. If you want to just while away an hour and a half, hour 40 minutes, it's a good film. It's silliness about a load of beer being taken from one point to another as part of a bet and all the things that go into that. And they run afoul, they being the beer runners, run afoul of a lawman who is chasing a runaway bride. And it's a fun, silly film. Importantly, it was out in 1977. And once I started reading this a little bit, I went, oh my gosh, this is the first offering of the Traveler 50th year items. We get Cluster Truck, which is the beginning of Traveler's 50th anniversary. So yay! I really believe that I am correct in this. I believe that Mongoose did this intentionally to get us all back into the mindset of what was going on in 1977 when this was released. So it's interesting. Movies that were out at the time. Saturday Night Fever came out late in 1977. Disco was king. No question, disco was everywhere in 1977. And those are just a few themes that they can look at as part of the 50th anniversary. Mongoose has, I'm sure, got a lot of plans for these. Close Encounters of the Third Kind was out in theaters in 1977. I remember because I slept through it. I wasn't crazy about that film. On TV, we had Quark, a short-lived sci-fi series starring Richard Benjamin. Logan's Run, the television adaptation of the 1976 film. And of course, one I think lends itself to this kind of stuff, Love Boat. Love Boat came out in 1977, and I can see a lot of Traveler applications for that. In addition to that, we had disco hits all over the place, including Dancing Queen, by ABBA. And of course, Andy Gibb was everywhere. So 1977 was an interesting year, and it was also the year that Traveler came out. So as part of the Traveler 50, we got our first offering, which is Cluster Truck. Interesting premise here. This is set in a sandbox. It's rimward of the Soleimani Sphere. So you're well away from the Imperium. You have some influence from the Aslan Hierate, and then a little bit of influence from the Hivers, but not a ton in this area. So it's very self-contained. And it's on Traveler map. You can take a look at it. The estuary, the world of estuary, the system, is featured here. So basically, the thing to remember is Smokey and the Bandit, which is lighthearted comedy. Not Duel, which is Steven Spielberg's first real film, which was out in 1971. Featured on Svengoolie just a few weeks ago, where a driver is being attacked and trying to be killed by a trucker. So the duel is between the truck and the car. So the technology as presented in this book is lower than what we're used to in Traveler. It's floating right around 8 to 10, maybe 11, and the estuary system is pretty closed, and you don't have access to a lot of high tech, and the tech you do have access to is very hand-to-mouth, that kind of thing. The Star Wars, that kind of stuff, which also was out in 1977, and a lot of people argue that inspired Traveler. The folks at Traveler, GDW, have always denied that, but I know that as far back as 1975, I was reading about the filming of Star Wars, and I saw a trailer for it in 76. So there was certainly time, and there was a lot of excitement in the area. So Star Wars can also be an element that they might touch on, but they'll have to be very careful, of course. But we get a look at the technology that's available here, and then an estuary cluster lexicon. So here we go, the jargon. CB radios were huge at the time. Jimmy Carter was president, so we had all the Carter country, Georgia, southern flavored things, southern United States flavored things that were popular on TV also. And here's our lexicon for it. Kind of interesting. Referees information. We get a nice look, and this is one of the things I liked, a look at trivial characters. And I've done this in role-playing games forever. It's a character that you don't expect to go anywhere. He's just going to be the guy behind the counter when the travelers ask a question. So you make up minimal stats for him. And this is a little mini system of how to do that. I've done this forever in role-playing because, frankly, you don't need a full backstory and all stats on a guy that's just going to say, it's on the left. You know, you don't need him to be anything. But this gives you a way to kind of formalize that. You get some group narrative checks where your players can combine various talents and maybe come up with an answer for something. And then we got the good old boy, sound asleep with his cowboy hat, and the nice little driving doggy. Travelers in the estuary cluster. If this is cluster truck, then I'm not calling them travelers in this. I'm going to call them mother truckers. Because if we're going to do a joke one way, we may as well do it the other way. So how your mother truckers can get around the estuary cluster. And then in-system travel. This is a lot of what's good about this book. You get a lot of stuff that is in-system in this, not jump drive related. And that's kind of neat because you have an opportunity to take a look at what it would be like if your travelers, mother truckers, just stayed in one area rather than jumping to other systems. So that was kind of neat. In-system travel, nice look at how you would have to plot your travel between one point and the other. Of course, you usually have to go around or over under the sun. You have to plan for where the body you're heading to is going to be when you finally get there. And this does a nice job of telling us about that. And then we get a look at our solar system, that's the Sol system. And then determining distance, the outer system transit, how long it's going to take. And we go back to the whole accelerate to the midpoint, turn over, and then decelerate to your destination. And that, of course, is real physics, but it's also something that was a staple in Traveler and was largely ignored, to my experience, in Mongoose 2nd. But I'm okay with that. However you want to do it is fine. If you just want to travel from A to B without going into details, that's fine. But you get some details here. And then calculating the transit. And then we talk a little bit about communication lag, which is actually very important in any kind of space game. You have to figure out how long it's going to take the radio signal to travel from one point to the other. And that is actually something I do in-game. If it's a minimal, 15, 20 second delay, I don't worry too much about it. If it's a minute or two, I actually have my players role play that out of it. Vessel operations. Overheads. In cluster truck, you usually just own the thing outright. Maybe you want it, I don't know, in a bet. Looking at you, Han Solo. So you have the ship, there's no mortgage per se. You have to pay maintenance, but the maintenance is more just keeping the thing moving. Space economics. In-system and inter-system trade. I like this. There's a lot of good stuff in here that will apply to any Traveler campaign, right in this section. And then we have a Dolly Parton-looking young woman handing over a glass of suds to our Burt Reynolds analog? I'm not sure. Let's go space trucking. And then license legalities and other BS. Stations. A lot of good detail on this. It's not your high-tech Traveler stuff. It's the lower stuff. But you could apply this anywhere in Traveler. You don't have to be in the estuary system to do this. salvage yard, boat builder, rig builder, shipyard, accreditation centers, and then trucker lore, what everybody knows. Here you go, what everyone knows, the historical stuff. No real details here, just light, broad brush paintings. And this would also be a good way if you wanted to introduce new travelers, new players to the game. You could bring them into this. It's very much less of a learning curve than your average traveler, and I think this would be a good way if you're looking to introduce people. Currency and resources, trucking in space, special circumstances, atmospheric braking. I liked this section a lot too. We get some stuff about atmo braking, where you're actually using the drag your vessel would create in the atmosphere to slow you down. So maybe you come in hot and you have to slow down through some atmo braking. You can ditch your trailer. You can do the trucker's fling, where you take a trailer up to point X, let it go, and let momentum take care of the rest. Put momentum in the driver's seat. That's interesting. A hot arrival, coming in fast. Slingshot, whip around a gravity well to get you go where you're going, maybe a little faster, change directions a little bit. Out of control in atmosphere. Some good stuff here. Tumbles, capturing a vessel, and then we get the high guard of the estuary cluster, which is pretty nice. And then we have different terms. We have janky, beyond janky, basic, standard, improved. Those are all terms for stuff that you've bought or cobbled together. Maybe you cobbled some pieces together, you're hoping they'll work. They're said to be janky. Component types are there. All this would apply to regular traveler campaigns. Constructing and upgrading vessels. A lot of this is more bootstrap kind of stuff. So you're skilled with whatever skill. You have engineering 3 and you're really good at it. Well, this is your opportunity to go ahead and build some stuff from scratch, improve some stuff. Kind of interesting stuff in here. Work time and facility requirements. Salvaging components. Rating a vessel. Constructing a vessel. Buying or otherwise obtaining a vessel. Maintaining a vessel, which is very important in this. And a lot of this flavor, once you get into this kind of stuff, you're heading into Firefly territory, which is a great place to be for me also. I love the old series Firefly. I always felt that it should have gone longer. It's a shame it didn't. Allegedly did come from a Traveler campaign from Joss Whedon. I do believe that, by the way. I've read enough over the years, and watching the series makes me think it did come from Traveler. So, or at least Traveler inspiration. You can have some power issues, your various components. And then here's your first vessel. Boats and trucks. In space, a truck is just something that tows something else from A to B. Mostly you have your own hitch, if you will. You have your own rig behind you, but maybe you're just driving someone else's. This all the deck plans for it. Just different vessels. Convoy trailer. Yeah, convoy. Lots of mid-20th century jargon used in this book. Small craft, which can be good because now you're inter-system. You're not leaving the system, so small craft become more important. Grapple missiles are pretty good. Smoky boats, yes, that's a thing in here. Smokies is mid-70s slang for police. And a grapple missile is something the police would use to attach a line to your vessel and maybe tow you in for arrest or whatever. So kind of an interesting thing. The smoky boat. See, thought I was lying about smoky boat. There it is. And then we have the estuary cluster itself. And we get a look at interplanetary law, fights of crimes of violence. The idea behind this book is to have fun, be lighthearted with it. If the travelers get into a fist fight and nobody gets seriously hurt, no weapons are drawn, odds are that the Smokies, the law enforcement authorities, are just going to let it go. They're going to break up the fight, tell everybody to behave themselves, and that'll be it. That, too, is just like Smokey and the Bandit and other movies of that era. And then, of course, the line you cross is when you draw a weapon or kill somebody. And then we get a look at the cluster, or the subsector itself. And this is on Traveler Map, by the way. And then we get nearby space. So we find out what's going on. The Confederation corridor, to spinward, to rimward, what's out there, to trailing. Gialp, or Gialp, however you want to say that, is our first system. And then we get a nice look at the systems. I think this is something the Mongoose should do more and more of. I love seeing the orbital paths of various bodies in a system. I love having the renderings in these. There's quite a few of those in this. Greep, or Greep. There you go, the Greep system. And again, some very 70s looking depictions. And these are all just various systems. Estuary itself, which is the main system we're dealing with here, and all the orbital bodies there. Estuary station. And then you are the trucker, and you're dealing with the big corporation that wants you out of business because they want to move in and take the little bit you're making, and you're fighting against them in some of these. And then Canaveral Station, a little throwback to the 60s and 70s, Cape Canaveral. IMB, or IM, the B is probably silent. Atla. Just nice in-system looks at all of these. And these, again, I just change the name and use the orbital paths, you're all set. This is a binary, so you can work on the celestial mechanics of that without having to have a PhD. The movers and shakers, United Metals, they're our bad guys, our heavies, our corporate dudes. They're the ones that are working against you and want to make money, and if they can run you out of business, boy, they're going to. And then Riaz Shipping, Consolidated Independence, and Mercury Security Services, and then Space Truckers Association. That's a loose affiliation of various space truckers, and they're almost like a mini Traveler's Aid, but only for people who are playing on the up and up as they're doing their space trucking. And then the campaign overview, who your travelers or mother truckers are, your referees overview. They do go into a lot here, that some standard stuff out of the core rulebook, such as if you're a scout, odds are you weren't a scout through any kind of military service, you were a scout through some kind of corporation, which can make it interesting too. And then the characters, a lot of these characters need to hit the gym, but that's kind of the idea. The only thing I don't like about these, I love having pictures, I love having the breakdown. I want to know how many terms they've served and or how old they are. I can tell by the picture how old they are approximately, but I would love to see number of terms served. That's something Mongoose continues to not put on the NPCs. Everything in Traveler goes around terms, so I don't understand why they don't put it in. Marshal Horace D. Fernandez, Hoss, is his nickname. This is an analog. Buford T. Justice, I believe was his name. Now, forgive me if I got that wrong. It has been decades since I've seen Smokey and the Bandit. I almost watched it in prep for this video, and I thought, nah. And then a lot of them have handles, but again, harkening back to the CD or CB craze. And then we go into the adventures, and this is where I'm going to stop. We have a bunch of adventures in this book. The tail third of the book is given up to adventures, which I have always liked. I like an adventure that introduces me and keeps me into what the book is about. So there's a series of adventures back in there for your mother truckers to engage in. So there you have it. That's a look at Traveler Cluster Truck, the last offering of 2025 from Mongoose, and a worthy offering, and one I seriously thought about not buying, and I'm very glad I did buy. So if you're on the fence about this guy and you didn't want the silly, I'm with you. I'm one that stopped buying Dragon Magazine in April in the late 80s, early 90s, because every issue was given over to a funny, see the air quotes, April's Fool's issue. And it was fun when Dragon did it, is a couple of pages in the April issue, but then they went over to the entire issue being April's Fools, and I stopped buying them. There have been other attempts at humor, quote unquote, by TSR in D&D, the Castle Greyhawk offering that was supposed to be funny, but was really just kind of a way to dump on Castle Greyhawk and Gygax a little bit. I've never cared for that kind of stuff in my role-playing stuff. I'll add the funny because I know what my players will enjoy. I don't like to read someone else's funny. It's just a personal opinion here. But that being said, and all that aside, Cluster Truck is worth having for all the celestial mechanics and the different things you can do with this for your traders in Traveler, your mother truckers, if you want to run this campaign. It's a nice sandbox campaign. And I'm excited that this is kicking off the 50th anniversary of Traveler, which of course will happen in 2027. I'm excited that this is out there. So again, harkening back to 1977, Dancing Queen, and Andy Gibb. We had Saturday Night Fever, and that soundtrack came out in late 77. The movie and the soundtrack. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I don't know how you'd adapt that to Traveler. I don't know. I slept through it. You had Quark, Logan's Run, and of course Love Boat, which just lends itself beautifully to it. You had all the CB radio stuff, which this gives a nod to, and of course the Burt Reynolds stuff. So there you have it. That's my look at Cluster Truck. One I was very questionable about, but I am glad I have in my library. And that's it. That's one man's opinion. Let me know what you thought of it. If you enjoyed it, maybe I missed some elements of it, or maybe I'm overlooking something, please let me know. One quick note, comments have been kind of nasty lately. I've had to actually delete a couple. I've had 2 or 3 where people have actually called me an idiot. I'm not going to leave that on my comments, just FYI. Anything constructive, if you think I did something poorly or I should have done it this way, or maybe take a look at this, hey, I'm all for those. Anytime you're going to get insulting, I'm going to zap the comment immediately. And I know I'm going to have a few people that are going to test me by putting up unpleasant comments. Please don't. It doesn't do anybody any good. Let's just hear. I make a channel where people can relax and have fun, and that's what this is all about. But that's it for today on page 121. Thank you for watching. Enjoy Cluster Truck, going back to 1977. And some of my viewers, not many, but some of my viewers weren't even around in 1977. I know the bulk of my viewers were, so maybe there's some good nostalgia in there for you. So that's all I've got today on page 121. I want to thank you for your time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.